What's up YouTube, Evan from Epic Duel Time here. So when I asked everybody for suggestions as to what it is that you would like to see for content for this format, a lot of people really unanimously had one thing in mind. Among, more duel videos, yeah I know. But besides just, deck discussions and things, one of the biggest things that everybody asked for was side decking help. So I bring you your choice of sides. So the idea of this is that you have 15 cards in a side deck, and there are some that you need to pick over other ones. And what you need to do is make up for the shortcomings of whatever it is that your deck has a problem with. In varied formats like what we have probably 8 to 10 decks that is worth looking at. You need to take 15 cards and apply them as often as possible, while being able to take something out of your deck that is inferior in the matchup. But your deck has to have a matchup that's preferable in certain aspects to be able to have certain side cards that can appropriately interact with it. In short, you don't want to screw yourself by playing these cards as well. So that's why we go over it. So let's start with hand traps. Hand traps are kind of, ever since we saw the heavy use of Valor and Maxi from the Tengu Plant format, we've seen these cards continuously have a lasting impact through, the Wind-Up Rabbit format, through the past probably almost 2 years. We've seen these cards really have a lot of impact, and we're still going to see that. However, last format we saw the use of Maxi as a deterrent for special summoning. We're going to see that less so now. Dragon Rollers aren't really a big threat anymore. They've been reduced down to a kind of choppy deck. And while they still exist, and they're still, worth looking at on the competitive scene, I don't think they're going to be the dominant deck anymore. So now we can look at potentially reintroducing Effect Valor back into our mainstream game. Why? Because we're seeing a lot of field effects. I'm going to mention that more so in a little bit, but we're seeing cards that get hurt by Valor more than using Maxi. Valor stops things. Maxi deters from things. The problem is that if the deterrent doesn't deter you from putting game on the board, well, then you need an interrupter, and Valor might be the go-to. But we'll talk about a few others in a bit. So another hand trap is DD Crow. This is kind of the forgotten third child. DD Crow is actually going to, I believe, see a bit of a comeback. We're looking at some kind of old faces in terms of decks that used to have a ton of annoying impact, and we were using DD Crow for them. Things like Insectors, Dark World. These decks in slower formats have a really good matchup against a majority of the top decks. And what they're able to do is gain a ton of card advantage based off of graveyard-based effects. Things like Grapha, Hornet. Those two cards, when they're in the graveyard, are way more dangerous. So being able to remove them really quickly with DD Crow, put your opponent in a position where they're really not going to be able to get back from that within the next turn. And that's going to let you set up and be able to reduce their resources by placing your own out. A couple more hand traps. We're seeing Puppet Plant and Electric Virus, and I think both of these are really going to have a showing. Last format, all we really saw was Electric Virus. This format, I think we're going to see more Puppet Plant. Remember that now that dragons have kind of been scaled back, we have fewer dragon decks, meaning we have fewer dragon targets for Electric Virus to be relevant against. However, Electric Virus is still incredibly good, as well as the fact that it doesn't just work on dragons, it works on machines. So it can take things like Dracosac, it can take Girgia monsters, it could take Machina monsters, who knows. But it can take these things, and it's kind of interesting. Now, when we go over to Puppet Plant, we're seeing the Prophecy deck becoming really aggressive right now, because they're going into things like first turn world plays, and that develops a ton of card advantage. How can you break through all of that? Potentially, they don't have a ton to keep you from stopping them with stopping hand-based effects. So if you Puppet Plant world and you can try to either tribute them off or deal some damage or put game on the board potentially, because now they don't control a spellcaster. So if you can beat them in one turn after a puppet plant, you've broken a really strong control. However, that's kind of a slim occasion. What we're really seeing is that puppet plant could be really good in a mirror match. Being able to use World's Effect on your own if you've got enough spellbooks to do it. Being able to keep that monster off the board so that they can't throw up Fate. Things like that can really, I believe, put Puppet Plant back into the game. I mentioned earlier that Maxi is more of a deterrent unless you can put game on the board. Well, these are the things that you'd be hoping to draw. Battle Fader and Scarecrow, these are interrupters, things that during the battle phase can save you from game. And sometimes they work and sometimes they don't. Obviously, if your opponent has like Vanity's Emptiness, Battle Fader isn't going to do so well. And if your opponent has, you know, Debunk, Scarecrow isn't going to do so well. But we're seeing a potential for both these cards to kind of be able to be a little more relevant. Let's look at the decks that, you know, can put game on the board really easily. Hieratics can do it right now. We're seeing Girgia being able to do it right now. Mermails can do it. We're seeing quite a few decks that can put a ton of damage on the board, and it's worth looking at cards that can prevent that. Now, even more prevention is keeping a play from happening altogether, in this case, Special Summon Prevention. Fossil Dyna is kind of my go-to right now for most decks, because if you can set, you know, 2 to 3 back row and potentially keep Dyna on the board for a couple turns, you're going to gain a ton more advantage and draw into more combo pieces for when Dyna dies. Your opponent has wasted resources on Dyna being alive, so now you've got your combo pieces to be able to make plays after he's dead. Vanity's Fiend is a little more specific for the Mermail deck. I won't get too into it, but obviously this card has a ton of attack points, and once you play it in Mermails, it's really hard to get around it. Now let's look at back row. I mentioned again, this is going to be a back row based format. So Mystical Space Typhoon, Dust Tornado, and my pick is going to be Twister. Why I believe Twister is a little bit better than Dust Tornado right now is because we're seeing Trap Stun being main decked as well as side decked. So we're seeing groups of 3 as well as Mystical Space Typhoon. So why that's important is that if I've got 2 MST in the main, 1 on the side, 3 Trap Stun in my main, I'm not really worried about if my opponent tries to side Dust Tornado against me, because it's a trap. And I know that Twister is going to be only destroying face-up spells and traps, and I have to pay some life points to do it. However, the things that I'm going to want to destroy are things like Tenkies, you know, chaining to Spellbook Tower, stopping certain plays from being able to progress. And why that's really important is that I'd rather pay life points and be more scenario based than the fact that I'm siding a card against probably a deck that can utilize Trap Stun really easily, or Decree. So I'm not really, you know, loving the whole Dust Tornado in the face of Trap Stun being so relevant. Now let's look at removal. This has been a really scaled back sort of you know, kind of control method since Fisher and Macro have gone to 1, which is a great thing, because I don't believe that any deck should be able to completely just lock an entire deck out that quickly. But both those cards at 1 are still very, very good side deck cards, as well as Banisher the Radiance is a card that I've been really looking at for the side deck, because it can't be MST'd. It doesn't have the weakness of being a spell. I find it easier to take 2 to 3 back row and protect Banisher the Radiance than I do to try to protect Dimensional Fissure. The ways of protecting Banisher the Radiance are way easier, so I think that card really has a ton of potential. Next, we have Light Imprisoning and Shadow Imprisoning Mirrors. Let's look at the decks that we're really even talking about. Light Imprisoning Mirrors are really going to be for Constellars. Constellars don't crumble to much. This is the card, and I do think it's worth 2 of it for the sheer fact that Constellars are that good. More importantly, we're seeing potential Boojins being played more. Well, you have a card, you know, you have 2 decks here. One obviously is better than the other, Constellars being a much more competitive deck. However, if you side it for Constellars and your opponent happens to play Lugians, well, you're in luck. Shadow Imprisoning Mirror, I believe, is a must for any deck that doesn't run a dark-based theme. I'd probably say, we're looking at Insectors. We're looking at Gravekeepers very soon. We're looking at Dark World. We are, we're looking at, quite a few decks that are dark, that are really strong. We're looking at Infernity still. I mean, these are decks that they can put quite a bit of hurt on you. So prevention effects like Light Imprisoning and Shadow Imprisoning Mirrors still have their place, and I do think that players are going to be running pairs of each of these in the side. On to more specific side decking, the overworked Spell Shattering Arrow. Obviously these are more towards Fire Fist, while Spell Shattering Arrow can be really good for Prophecy as well. My problem with both of them is they're both they don't really damage either of those decks in a way that keeps them from coming back. If I flip up Light Imprisoning Mirror and you never draw an MST, you're probably going to lose if you play Constellars. If you overworked my bear and I have another bear, I'm fine. I mean, it's a very short-term answer to a much bigger problem, and thus far there isn't really a long-term solution for being able to stop decks like Fire Fist. So they're still good cards. I just think that they're still weaker links. Next, I mentioned all the trap stun craze, but Royal Decree is still very popular. Things like Chaos Dragons, things like Prophecy can side into Decree very, very comfortably, even main deck it. Goes in Match and Rivalry of the Warlords. We're going to see a lot less of these cards simply because decks like Fire Fist can run under them really, really comfortably, but decks like Constellars cannot. They can run under Gozan, but they cannot handle Rivalry, as well as Evil Swarms cannot handle Rivalry. And what we're going to see is at some point the Sylvans will come out. I don't know how competitive they could be. It depends on what we're getting for TCGs, but if they're anything competitive, Goes in Match really does crumble their lineup. But we're seeing Rivalry being played. It's an interesting card. The problem is that I think too many decks are able to control one type of monster. Prophecy with Spellcasters, Fire Fist with Beast Warriors, Gear with Machine, and they can do an OTK on all machine monsters. So I think we're seeing a little too many decks that are able to handle it. One of the main decks that cannot handle Rivalry very well is Mermail. Mermail have a hard time with it. Now, Mermail can answer it quite easily. However, not in the perfect of ways. Too many of the cards are Fish, Aqua, Sea Serpent. So there's that inconsistency. Then we have the virus cards, Deck Devastation and Eradicator Epidemic. Deck Devi is actually going to be really good for, obviously, the things it's always been good against. However, flipping it up against Mermail is still just as devastating, because with Dragoons being at 1, there are fewer chances of him having had Dragoons in the hand, meaning you could still, have Abystios plays. You're going to have a lot fewer plays if you flip up Deck Devi. Eradicator is still Eradicator. It's still the same thing. It's just really, at this point, there are fewer comebacks from it. If a deck that you're siding this against is so spell and trap heavy that you are running this card against it, odds are you're going to the next game. I mentioned things that hurt Mermail earlier. These are two cards that absolutely really crumble the lineup, is Debunk and Soul Drain, and they're worth running. Both of these cards are absolutely worth running. Soul Drain, obviously, being only at 1 means you can only utilize 1. However, the card is that good, and it's still worth using. Debunk is kind of an interesting one because you can still use this for things like Dragon Rulers, as well as hand traps. If your opponent plays a lot of Veilers and Maxis, you can still use them against that. So it depends. I think we're going to see this used more exclusively for Mermails, though. But it does really break up and interrupt the lineup, and keeps most players from being able to be benefited from. Next, Effect Negation. I mentioned this when I talked about Veiler. We're seeing 3 main things. Skill Drain, which is way fewer decks that can run it. Fiendish Chain, which is usable in almost everything and is being used in almost everything, and Breakthrough Skill, which I think has a ton of potential for the future. So Skill Drain is mostly for decks that can play under it comfortably. So TGs, we're seeing Dragon Rulers being able to play with it. We're still seeing like Barbaros decks like that, Malefics even. So we're still seeing the same old decks that can run Skill Drain. And Fire Kings. And then we're seeing Fiendish Chain, used in almost everything because it's an amazing back row card. Not only does it negate effects, but it keeps the monster from attacking. And then we're seeing Breakthrough Skill, and I think this is going to be really important for coming up because of Evil Storm Exitron or Exitron Knight, the new rank 4 who blows up things. But we're going to see him because he can use it on your turn. We're also going to see it for Abyss Gaios as well. The idea is, though, the fact that if it's in graveyard and you use it, Trap Stun doesn't work on it. Trap Stun and Decree don't work on it if it's in the grave. So that's a really, really important factor of the card, is that it does have a bit of a loophole. Last things I have for you guys are Imperial Iron Wall and Mistake. These are two cards that I absolutely recommend, one more than the other. Imperial Iron Wall is really, really good this format, especially for any Dragon Ruler decks, any Prophecy decks. This nails them. If you can play under this yourself, yeah, it can completely pin them to the wall. This is gonna be great for Mermails as well, because Mermails aren't overly fond of banishing things. The only thing they really want to banish is stuff for title, and they can give that up for a little while until you find an answer to this. But if you have a hard time with this card, then yeah, they're gonna totally be able to play it. And it prevents their stuff from getting banished too. So if you've got, Debunk or something, you can't activate it while this is up. Then we have Mistake. Mistake's a harder card to use. However, there are certain decks that can play under it really comfortably. But with the amount of searching done this format, I think that Mistake's still a little far off. I do really like it. I just wish that we had an opportunity where this card would just be a little more relevant. We do too much searching to really be able to have every deck utilize this. However, there are a handful of decks that can still work with it. And that's really all I got for you guys. But please talk about the kinds of cards you like to play in your side deck. What do you think is really good against the most important matchups of this format? What do you think of the cards that I've mentioned? Do you think that they're kind of on point of what you were looking at? What did I miss? If there's a card that's out there that you thought I definitely should have been included in this video, talk about it. Have some discussions in the comments below. I'll be participating in the comments as well, putting some input here and there. But yeah, keep up with the great ideas on videos and content you guys want to see. As always, like, comment, subscribe, and keep Duel in America.